Namaste children, I am Smita, your English teacher from Mangala Vidya Mandira. Class 9 Standard, Subject English. In today's class, let us learn a lesson called as 3 questions. So Unit 2 prose 3 questions. So this story called 3 questions was written by Count Leo Tolstoy. So Leo Tolstoy was a great Russian novelist. He was born on 9 September 1828. He is famous for his books War and Peace and Anna Karenina. So during the last 30 years of his life, he established himself as a moral and religious leader. He is regarded as one of the greatest authors of all time. So let us begin the lesson. So Unit 2, prose 3 questions. Children, experience is the best teacher, isn't it? Theoretically, we may learn many things, but a person who has practical experience is a better learner. So today we are going to learn a story of a king who tries to find answer to 3 questions, and his life teaches him a lesson, and he finds answer to the questions that he was trying to seek. A king has 3 questions and he is seeking answers to them. What are the questions? Does the king get what he wants? Read to find it out. The thought came to a certain king that he would never fail if he knew 3 things. First, what is the right time to begin something? Second, who should a king listen to? Third, what is the most important thing for a king to do? The king therefore sent messengers throughout his kingdom, promising a large sum to anyone who would answer these 3 questions. Many wise men came to the king, but they all answered his questions differently. So once a thought comes to the mind of a king that he would never fail, or he would always achieve or succeed if he knew answers to 3 things. So which are those 3 things or the questions? The first question to which he was trying to find answer was, what was the right time to begin something? Okay, second question to which he was trying to find the answer was, whom should he listen to or whose instructions he should follow? And the third one, he wanted to find what is the most important thing that he should do as a king. So the king wanted to find answers to these 3 questions. So king desperately wanted to find the answer. So what did he do? He sent messengers and also promised that he would give a huge amount of money to those who answered his questions. In reply to the first question, some said the king must prepare a timetable and then follow it strictly. Others said that it was impossible to decide in advance the right time for doing something. The king should do whatever seemed necessary at that time. Yet others said that the king needed a council of wise men who would help him act at the proper time. But then others said that there were some things which could be urgent. These things could not wait for the decision of the council. In order to decide the right time for doing something, it is necessary to look into the future, and only magicians could do that. The king therefore would have to go to magicians. So while trying to find answers to those 3 questions, many intelligent men came to the king, and all of them gave different answers to his questions. So what were the answers given? For the first question, someone said the king should prepare a timetable and follow it strictly. Some others said that it was not possible to decide the right time to do something. So whatever seemed necessary at a particular time, the king should do it. Some others said that king needed a council of intelligent men who would give the king directions to act in a particular way. So some others said that there are certain things which would be very essential or urgently done, to which one cannot wait until the wise men give their decisions. So they said that going to magicians would help in that case, as that would help the king to look into the future. So it's better if king went to the magicians. In their answers to the second question, some said that the people most necessary to the king were his counselors. Others said priests. A few others chose doctors, and yet others said that his soldiers were the most necessary. To the third question, some said attack, others chose fight, and yet others religious worship. As the answers to his questions were so different, the king was not satisfied. He decided to seek the advice of a certain hermit who was widely known for his wisdom. Okay, so for the second question, who is the most important person to whom the king should listen to? So some said counselors, others said priests, doctors, soldiers, etc. So for the third question, what is the most important thing for the king to do? Some said king should attack enemies. Others said that he should focus on religious worship. So people were giving different answers to the questions that the king asked. So the king was not satisfied at all, and he decides to find answers with the help of a hermit who was known for his wisdom. So who is a hermit? Hermit is a person who lives alone, apart from the rest of the society, especially for religious reasons. The king put on ordinary clothes and went to meet the hermit. Before he reached the hermit's hut, the king left his horse with his bodyguard and went alone. As the king came near the hermit's hut, he saw the hermit digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and continued digging. The king went up to the hermit and said, "I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions." And he repeated the questions. Now, the king decides to go to the forest. That is where hermits live, isn't it? The king wears ordinary clothes and goes to meet the hermit. So before reaching the hut of the hermit, he leaves his horse with his bodyguard at a little distance and he goes alone. So when the king comes near the hut, what was the hermit doing? He was digging the ground. He greets or wishes the king and he continues his work. Now the king explains the reason why he had come there and he repeats the questions. The hermit listened to the king but did not speak. "You are tired," said the king. "Let me take the spade and work in your place." "Thanks," said the hermit, giving the king his spade. When the king had dug 2 beds, he stopped and repeated his questions. The hermit gave no answer. Okay, now what happened? Hermit doesn't speak a word. Now the king asked the hermit to give him the spade, and the hermit looked tired. Okay, the hermit looked tired and the king asks for the spade. So hermit gives the spade to the king and the king starts digging the ground. The king had made 2 holes in the ground and after some time he repeats his questions, but the hermit doesn't answer at all. 1 hour passed, then another. The sun went down behind the trees and at last the king stuck the spade into the ground and said, "I came to you, wise man, to get answers to my questions. If you can give no answer, tell me so and I will return home." Okay, time was passing, 1 hour, 2 hours. The sun also went down. It was evening time and the king now loses his patience. He says that he had come there to find answers to those 3 questions and tells the hermit that if the hermit couldn't answer, then he would return to his home. "Here comes someone running," said the hermit. The king turned round and saw a bearded man running towards them. His hands were pressed against his stomach, from which blood was flowing. When he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. The king and the hermit removed the man's clothing and found a large wound in his stomach. The king washed and covered it with his handkerchief, but the blood would not stop flowing. The king redressed the wound until at last the bleeding stopped. Now at that moment, hermit looks at a man who comes running and tells the same to the king. A bearded person was coming towards them and blood was flowing from his stomach and he had kept his hands pressed to his stomach. The moment he reached the king, he became unconscious and he falls down. So what did the king do? And king and the hermit do? They removed the man's clothes and found a big wound in his stomach. That means someone had injured him, isn't it? Now the king, he washed the wound and he covers it with a handkerchief. he dresses the wound again and he covers the wound until the bleeding stops. And finally the bleeding stops. Okay, I know you're curious to know what happens later, isn't it, children? So let us continue the lesson in the next class. I hope you have understood the lesson so far. So you also have homework for this time, that is, write a moral story that you know. Okay, you can write any moral story that you know and you have to send it through WhatsApp. Okay, thank you, children.